Hey there. How you guys doing? It is Wednesday, August 15th, 2018, and welcome, my friends, to the A-Side Live Chat podcast, or the S&M podcast if you're a wild one. How are all you guys doing this morning? My old man back is acting up a little bit. I can barely get around over here. But other than that, I'm doing wonderful. That's neither here nor there. It's slow time out there in the MMA world. We're in the off season, so to speak. So whatever small sliver of off season we seem to get. So we thank you guys so much for joining us on this fine morning. My name is Shaun Al-Shatti, and as always, I am joined by my good friend Marc Raimondi, who, if my eyes don't deceive me, lo and behold, if I'm not mistaken, he is actually home for once. He is actually in LA. It's a miracle. How are things, Marc?
I am home, if you count home as this pod that I'm sitting in Hollywood. But yeah, I am in LA. I'm not traveling this week. Until tomorrow when I go on vacation for a few days to Nashville for a bachelor party. I will not speak a word of what happens on that bachelor party after this sentence. But I'm back in the Vox Media office in Hollywood. I'm in this sauna looking pod that's like, if I was a bigger man, I don't think I could sit in here. But I'm here. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to talk about all things mixed martial arts. And maybe, just maybe, a little pro wrestling. But
you're telling me if you were a normal-sized man, you would not be able to fit
hold on. What is normal? What is normal size? What does that mean? What does that entail?
Let's go. Let's make 5'8" the barometer there.
I mean, I am admittedly a below average in height human being. Yes, a man anyway. Maybe I'm an above average woman. I don't know, but yeah, I'm certainly a below average man as far as height goes.
You're always
and also below average in many other facets, but height is the one that we're talking about right now.
You're always an above average woman in my heart, Marc. I got you. Also, what the hell? Why is it a bachelor party in Nashville? What happens in Nashville?
What happens in Nashville, Shaun, stays in Nashville. Like I said, that is the last I will speak of this bachelor party.
That is the weirdest, most random location for a bachelor party.
What's wrong with Nashville?
No, nothing. It's just like I don't think of party places when I think of Nashville, I guess. It's like some kind of...
You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong then. Gonna hit up some country music bars.
Ooh, you gonna do some line dancing?
You never know. You never know. Stay tuned to my social media accounts, which will not be in use at all this weekend. Yeah, sure. You think I can stay on social media for a second? I'll have my laptop with me. I'll be ready to go for any breaking news.
I know
I'll be at the country western bar with my laptop in front of me, banging out articles.
That's exactly what's going to happen. For those, I mean, you guys wouldn't know, but anytime we go anywhere with Marc, dude's literally just carrying his backpack everywhere. This guy is ready to go write an article at any moment in time. What a pro.
That's how it's got to be, man. It's a lifestyle.
Hey, true that. So let's not waste any more times. It may be slow times right now in the MMA world while we wait for bigger things to come, but there's still plenty to talk about today. UFC Lincoln is a few weeks away. We got PFL 6 this week. The return of Ray Cooper, who knocked out Jake Shields in one of the more stunning upsets of the year. Also Bellator 204. I mean, you got Darren Caldwell on that. James Gallagher. Undefeated wrestling stud Logan Storley, who, if you haven't watched him, that's a guy to watch in the future. There's plenty to be interested about there. UFC pay-per-view numbers as well. But, I mean, this is your show. So whatever you want us to talk about, ask us a question in the MMA Fighting page below, or use the hashtags chat rappers or the A-Side on Twitter, and we will address your questions. Also, some quick housekeeping before we really get started. An update on the podcast front. I know we've been promising this every week, and it's been very frustrating for us as well, but as we announced last week, we finally been able to cut through like a lot of the red tape that's been involved for us to make this sucker easy to listen to in an audio form for all you guys out there. And starting this week, today's pod will be uploaded to the MMA Beat SoundCloud, which has now become more of a general MMA fighting SoundCloud. So the same place you listen to the audio version of the MMA Beat, you'll now be able to get an audio-only version of our show as well. And hey, who knows what else may be popping up on that feed sometime in the future. So thank you so much for sticking with us as we get this off the ground. As for iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, those are all next. We've been promised that'll be taken care of soon. Hopefully it will. In the meantime, you can catch us on SoundCloud. 1% better every week. Isn't that right, Marc?
We're getting there. We're getting there. Please be patient. I know it's been a struggle some weeks with technology, but I feel like we're at a good place. I feel like our audio is improved, I hope. And we are working hard to get on iTunes. I think it's going to happen. We're working on a whole lot of other stuff too. So we're trying to grow this. It's still in its infant stages, embryonic stages, if you will. So please hang with us while we go through these growing pains.
Very much so. So let's, without any further ado, let's dive right into your questions. And so first up today comes from the MMA Fighting page. This is from Dizzy Dorf. And he wants to know about Max Holloway. Says, Max Holloway, any updates when Max will fight again? He's been pulled 3 times this year already, and the last one was the worst, indeed. Also, he asks, who is the A side of this podcast? He. I'm just going to jump right in there. I mean, the A side secretly stands for Al-Shatti. Just don't tell Marc that, but that's kind of a little secret between us. But Marc, what do you think about Max Holloway?
I'll let that one slide for now, Shaun. Yeah, Max Holloway, we haven't heard a whole lot from him. I know he did an interview with Ariel Helwani on the Helwani show a few weeks back. Dana White spoke about him briefly on UFC Unfiltered last week, and it seems like he wants to get back into the cage before too long. I think he said on the Helwani show that he wanted to be back before the end of the year, which when we were in Vegas, last month, Shaun, we thought that Max Holloway coming back before the end of the year was going to be a long shot at best, just because of the information that we had at the time. It seems like he's doing better now. Thank goodness for that. That is of the utmost importance. That's the bottom line, that he's doing better, that he's healthier, because it was touch and go and kind of scary there for a little bit. I don't know what is in store for him now. It seems like they're not going to do an interim title at featherweight. It seems like they are going to wait for him to come back. I saw some speculation over the last few days that Holloway Ortega could be the main event of UFC 230 at Madison Square Garden. I don't know if that's true or not. I know they need a main event. Everyone knows that's a big card. We've talked about that a lot on the show to fill that spot. But yeah, I mean, Holloway it seems like the scare that was earlier in July has kind of dissipated a bit. It's not as scary now. It seems like he's doing better, and he could be back. So that's it seems like good news on that front. So let's wait and see. Maybe he's back at MSG. What do you think?
I mean, we already know the MSG card already has a main event. I'm not going to go into this, but it already has the main event on that card. It is the Diaz show. But yeah, man, I mean, there's nothing new on the Max front right now. I think we all want news just as badly as you guys do. I mean, if you remember, it was only like 3 weeks ago that he said he was just starting to feel better, and that was it. And that was already like a couple weeks after his pullout. So this one may take a while. And honestly, man, like that's fine. Like it's better to be safe than sorry on this type of thing. They have I know you Marc said that they're not looking to do an interim title fight, and that's the same thing that I'm hearing. But if they need to, man, like again, better safe than sorry. There's a very high quality interim fight there where they could do Jose and Brian Ortega. There's no need to rush something like this, especially with Max. I mean, he is so young, man. Like that dude is 26, and you hope he has a lot of good years ahead of him. You don't want to shorten his career unnecessarily by rushing him back from something like this. So if he does come back this year, I expect it to be late this year, like Marc said, either MSG maybe or one of the 2 December cards, 230 or 231, or I'm sorry, 231 or 232. But man, I wouldn't even be surprised if it takes till next year. Like this is a very serious thing.
One last thing on Holloway. Some of the stuff that came out in the aftermath of him pulling out of UFC 226 was some BS that was unconfirmed. Oh, he had a stroke. Some reports said, I believe it was Therese Owens that said he'll never fight again. He's retiring from MMA. Like this is just irresponsible stuff. I mean, this is someone whose health is on the line. It's just really, you can't be spreading those rumors in the aftermath of something like that, because people pick up on that and it goes everywhere. And now it almost became fact. I mean, people were saying it as fact that Max Holloway had a stroke and he's retiring from MMA because of these reports. It's just irresponsible bullshit. I cannot stand that stuff. If you're gonna say something like that, you have to make sure that you're right. Anyone who's in the public eye, you need to corroborate that information. You can't just say something about someone's health like that from one source. It's so dangerous and irresponsible. That really rubbed me the wrong way. And for Holloway to have to dispute that publicly, I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just the way of the world, I guess, in the social media era. But anyway, let's move on from that.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Also, I like when you get fired up enough to swear, because it's rarer than me swearing. So I like that.
I try to keep it clean on this family show, Shaun. But we know in real life that I curse like a sailor. Anyway,
that's true.
From the MMA fighting comment section on the website, from Lucian, Kamaru Usman announcing himself as the backup fighter for UFC 228. I was really surprised to read Usman declare so openly that not only is he the backup fighter for that welterweight championship match, but he'll also be weighing in there, if I understood correctly. I've known that they have had those backup options ready in prior big fights as well, but I can't recall a time when they were this open about it. What do you think is behind the openness? Is it Usman just talking about it because that is who he is, or is UFC putting that out there from the start because they are worried about missing weight or other issues?
So this is an interesting one, man, because I mean, if you a little context, if you guys missed it, Kamaru was on the MMA Hour this week, and he told our own Luke Thomas that he's officially like tapped by the UFC to be the official backup for UFC 228, which goes down next month, September 8th. So he's basically like doing a training camp, like it's a fight, like he'll weigh in, he'll get paid, and if something happens to Darren Till or Tyron, Usman is right there to step up. And man, honestly, I love it. I really love it. I think this is something the UFC has done quite frequently recently. Like if you remember when we were in town for UFC 226, they had both events, Thiago Santos for the tough finale and Alexander Volkov weighed in for 226 just as a backup. And I could not get behind this more. Like this feels like the UFC has finally like embraced sort of the hard lessons that they've had to learn the past few years, right? Like all these main events that fell through at the last second on fight week. In a way, like Usman's presence also like alleviates a lot of the concerns that I know we had and a lot of people had about maybe not the justification for giving Darren Till a title shot, but also just the ramifications of it. Where I mean, this is a man who missed weight for his last fight, and he is a giant. Like we saw in the stare down with Tyron Woodley, he's a effing giant. And now if something bad happens, something goes wrong, we'll end up with a damn good fight still. Like Kamaru and Tyron is a tremendous fight. That could be the title fight right now. So, I mean, Kamaru said on Monday that he actually dreamt that this is how he'll become champion. And stranger things have certainly happened. I just think, frankly, we need more of this, man. Like, I'd love to see this for like every big pay-per-view, every big event, whether it's like a Fox card or something. Just like either this or like stacking the deck with like multiple contender fights of the same weight class. Like it seems like the UFC's kind of been doing at middleweight for UFC 230. As for, I mean, Kamaru's openness, I love that too. Like, why not? Why not just get yourself out there as like, I'm obviously this backup, I'm this next in line? Because worst case, you get your name out there in a way that almost like cements in people's minds that you're the next in line. Like it kind of crystallizes for people that Kamaru's next. You're putting that idea in their heads, what it would be like for you to get their shot. And best case, man, like you can hype a fight that ultimately ends up happening. And it maybe just has that little extra promotional juice to it just because you've been talking about it. And again, you put that idea in people's heads. And maybe even for Kamaru, I mean, we hear from fighters sometimes where the media, me doing the media and just talking about the fight publicly and having to think through answers and things kind of normalizes and gets them normalizes the process and gets them ready for the fight. So even just for Kamaru to be talking about it, I think, and be a presence like that probably is getting him at least a little ready for a fight that he doesn't even know if he has. So I dig it all the way around.
I have a great idea. Now stick with me here, Shaun.
Ooh, I like this. I
have a great idea. I know this is revolutionary. How about instead of having a backup fighter? I know this is crazy, but just hang with me for a second here. Instead of having a backup fighter for a title fight, how about you put a contender in the title fight who is not in danger of missing weight, who didn't miss weight in his last fight? How about that? Why need a backup fighter when you can put someone who doesn't miss weight as the #1 contender, as the challenger? How about that? Wouldn't that be an amazing idea? Darren Till missed weight by 3 pounds last time out. He's getting a title shot off that, and that's why they needed a backup fighter, because he missed weight. How about putting a guy who didn't miss weight as the contender? Genius! I swear to God. But in all seriousness,
this is revolutionary stuff. Truly revolutionary stuff.
This is something that the UFC is doing more, and for a few reasons. I mean, there are pros and cons to it. I do like it because this is a crazy world that we're living in with weight cutting, and it's not going away anytime soon. And it's been a problem. So I do like the idea of having someone there just in case a fight falls out. If it's not going to be a title fight between Woodley and Till, Usman can be there. He can weigh in and he can slide right in. There's no issue. The commission is on board with it. His medicals are done. He weighs in. He weighs in at the correct mark. That's all. That's fine. I like that. The one issue that I do have with it, aside from the fact that, again, don't give fighters who miss weight title shots. We've already seen the issues there. My other issue with it is that, let's say Woodley and Till weigh in fine. Till makes weight. It's no problem. Woodley fights Till at UFC 228. Usman has no fight. So he then cuts weight. He trains. He cuts weight. He'll get a little bit of money. I don't know how much. I don't think he's gonna get a whole show purse, but at least the UFC will pay him. That's fine. But he does the weight cut for September. With the way that weight cutting is in the sport, if you do a weight cut for September, it's hard to turn that around anytime quickly. You know what I mean? Like Thiago Santos did that for July for the tough finale main event, the middleweight fight. He was the backup fighter for that. So he weighed in successfully in the beginning of July. Then he had to turn around and do another weigh-in for UFC 227, cut weight again for the Kevin Holland fight on that card. And he said afterward that was brutal, that he never wants to do that again. So, and we've seen cases where hard weight cuts, one after another, can cause serious issues. Look at Sijara Eubanks last December, before she was going to fight for the inaugural flyweight title in the UFC at the tough finale. She had all those weight cuts in a row on tough over the summer, then tried to turn around and cut weight again to 125 for December. She made weight okay on the show, and it was hard, but she made weight. But because she did all those weight cuts, because she did those consecutive weight cuts, it killed her for December.
So it sounds like you don't like this then.
I like it for that one card. I like the fact that there is a security blanket just in case Till doesn't weigh in, just in case Till misses weight, something happens with Woodley, an injury. I like that in a vacuum, and it should between Woodley and Till. Then what happens with Usman? He cuts weight for September. He can't turn around and fight again in October. It doesn't work that way. If fighters fought at a more natural weight, they can turn around very easily, and after a weight cut of a few pounds, they can come back and fight the next month if they had to. But because of the way weight cutting is, because it's so strenuous on the body, you can't turn around and do that again. It's just bad. Look at same thing with Max Holloway. I know that he has said that it was not a weight cutting issue that kept him out of UFC 226, but I have a hard time believing there was not some kind of residual damage from that extreme weight cut that he had trying to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov in April. I really do believe that. I believe that he had a really hard time cutting. He cuts a lot of weight. He was coming off a cut a few months earlier for the Jose Aldo fight, and he tried to do it again from in just a week's notice, trying to cut all that weight in a week's notice. And I believe when he tried to start kind of the diet down, I believe that his body just said, "F this, man. I'm not doing this again." Your body is not supposed to do that. At some point, the body just says, "Screw this. I'm out. I'm not dealing with this bullshit." And I think that's what happened with Holloway. I'm not a doctor, of course. I could be completely wrong, but we know enough about weight cutting and about consecutive weight cuts like that to tell us that there is something that is unhealthy and dangerous about it.
So that's interesting. I think almost then it's like a case-by-case basis at that point, right? Because like I'm okay with it in this case, because like it's one thing for a guy like Max where he has a lot of weight to cut and he also has these kind of problems. Kamaru, he's a big guy, but he's never really had weight cutting issues. We've never really heard him discuss how difficult his weight cut is. It seems like he has a pretty straightforward weight cut. In a case like this, I'm almost not even just okay with it. I'm really down with it, especially if it's a situation where, say, this almost counts as like a half fight for Kamaru, where he'll just get the winner of these guys regardless, and maybe that he doesn't have to do it. It's not like he's Thiago Santos still trying to work his way up the ladder. Like he's already there. It maybe once Darren Till and Tyron Woodley actually fight, they could just give Kamaru Usman the next shot, and that would be in sometime in 2019. So he doesn't have that quick turnaround. Because I agree, that's where the problem is, right? Like, unless you're fighting at heavyweight and you're like an Alexander Volkov, where it doesn't matter. But like that quick turnaround is 100% not a thing that's healthy or okay, or just generally like a practice we should be promoting. But if it's a thing where Kamaru is just in there as the backup, and then he can get that next shot sometime in 2019, get time to recover as if he fought, and then just turn right around and be that title contender, I'm all for that. What do you, would that be okay in your head then?
Yeah, that's totally fine. But we know it doesn't always work that way because the UFC has slots to fill. They have title fights they need to put on pay-per-views. They have these main and co-main events they're trying to fill with title fights. So if Woodley or Till is ready to go, they got to be ready to go. I mean, of course, they're going to be fighting on the same card, so they're doing the same weight cut. So maybe there will be some air between UFC 228 and the next title fight. So that would be good. But I just don't want to see. I don't want to see Usman cut weight and then try to come back and go to a contender, a title eliminator against somebody in like November. I don't want to see that. If it's not that, if he does get time off after that, then I'm all for it. That's fine. But Thiago Santos, again, didn't have that luxury. It's a different situation, of course, but he was the backup fighter in July, came back and cut weight all over again for August, and he said it was brutal on him. So I don't want to see that happen again.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point there. So I agree with you 100%. What do we have up next?
So we got from the MMA Fighting website a list of updates on fighters and situations from Eduardo Bueno, who is a regular in the comments section on MMAfighting.com in the A-Side live chat now. No true or false today, just an old school any updates question on random fighters, a tradition in Luke's era. Who's Luke? What? Who's that guy?
How dare you? How dare you?
So do you guys know something about, and he lists a few situations and fighters. So I'm gonna read them off to you, and you can do your best to answer. Is that cool?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Michael Chandler signing with Bellator or the UFC?
So I mean, there's no update on that. I mean, there's nothing on that front. Like he started negotiations a few months ago, I believe, on a new contract. Nothing settled yet, though. I mean, personally, I mean, he's 32. He's still in his prime. He's better than ever. He's looked like a killer recently. Like, I don't know how much more there is for him to accomplish in Bellator. I would love to see him make that move to the UFC. But there's no resolution yet. I mean, he has always been one of the more hardcore Bellator guys. He has been extremely loyal to that promotion from the get-go. But he did say he has expressed that he's willing to test his options this time around. So that'll be something to watch. But also, I mean, it's bizarre to me. It's just crazy how him and Eddie are so linked in so many ways, right? Because like right now they're both free agents at the exact same time, more or less. So like whatever gets us Alvarez Chandler 3, that's where I hope those guys end up, because I need to see that damn fight.
That's one of my favorite fights. Well, two of my favorite fights of all time. The first one is maybe my favorite fight of all time, and the second one was almost as good. I would, for newer fans, please seek out those fights. Go watch them. I think they're on YouTube. They're somewhere. They're easy to find, relatively speaking. Go check out Alvarez Chandler 1 and Alvarez Chandler 2. Those fights are incredible. Shaun, I want to ask you before we move on to the next person, the next update. Where do you want to see Alvarez go? Would you like to see him stay in the UFC, or do you want to see him to go to Bellator, to Rizin, somewhere else?
I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week, but I think Bellator would be an interesting move for Eddie. I feel like kind of renew him and maybe get some fresh matchups out there. But again, whatever it takes to get Alvarez Chandler 3, that's where he should go, because I need to see that fight. The first fight, for newer fans may not know, the first fight was literally on the same night as Shogun Henderson won. So it was like basically the greatest night of mixed martial arts ever, just between those two fights. So whatever it takes to get Alvarez Chandler 3, that's where he should go. What about you?
I put a poll on my Instagram a few days ago. Where would you rather see Eddie Alvarez fight next, to UFC or Bellator? Not a scientific poll, of course, by any means, but most people actually chose Bellator, which surprised me a bit. I was surprised by that. My take on this is wherever Eddie Alvarez is going to get paid, wherever he's going to get the most money and the best opportunity to maximize his value and the rest of his prime, I would say he should go there. I don't know where that is. I'm not in on those negotiations, but he's a guy that you know you wish the best for, and whatever is gonna pay the most to feed his family. Moving on
really quickly, that is surprising to me that Bellator was the overwhelming favorite in that poll. I wonder what that is. If that's a symptom of like maybe there's a little Eddie fatigue in the UFC, or people just want to see something different. Because I mean, Bellator is making some moves, man. I mean, this welterweight tourney, Gegard, Rory, like I don't know. It's interesting to me that Eddie going to Bellator was the winner there.
Bellator could do a pretty sick lightweight Grand Prix if Eddie Alvarez was on board, huh?
Oh boy, I mean, especially if Chandler stays, you got Chandler, Bendo, Premise, all those guys, man.
Patricky.
Oh, for sure.
That's a loaded lightweight division. So moving on, updates: Ben Rothwell versus Usana.
So this one, I mean, this one's a pretty straightforward one. Like he accepted I believe it was a 2-year suspension for a couple out of competition drug tests earlier this year. I think it was like April where he accepted that. No, I mean, those tests were from February of last year. So he'll be eligible to compete again, like early February of next year.
2019, right?
Yeah.
Carlos Condit.
Ooh, natural born killer. Just last month, I mean, Brandon Gibson told us that Carlos was headed out to TriStar in Montreal to get some cross training in with his old rival, Rory McDonald, for the Gegard fight. So, I mean, he's already said he wants to fight again this year. I welcome that. I know a lot of people that have sort of called for his retirement, or maybe not called for it, are hoping for him to retire because of the slump he's on. But I think he still has stuff to give us. I still love a Carlos Condit fight. So I think he's going to fight again this year. And him training at TriStar is interesting.
Wonder Boy. You like my little Stephen Thompson. Stephen Thompson.
Oh man, you didn't go. You should have committed to it. Come on, is that your Jack Black? What was that?
I can't commit.
You can't. There are no half measures here on the A Side podcast. How dare you?
Stephen Wonderboy Thompson update.
I mean, he's nursing a knee injury, I believe, from the Darren Thompson loss. I mean, he's already said he wants to return by the end of the year, maybe like early 2019. So that's kind of what he's looking at. And I'm interested to see when he comes back, man, because I mean, we've already heard him since the Till fight sort of talk about these close losses that he's had, and sort of reflecting on adjustments he needs to make to his style, like this pattern that's really developed for him of getting in these close fights because of his counter-striking ways. It goes against his natural instincts for him to sort of not be that counter-striker, but it'll be interesting if he is able to make those adjustments.
The Bully, Gray Maynard.
Oh, that's a good one. You know what? I haven't heard a lot on Gray. I think he's 39 at this point. I don't think he's fought since last July, if I'm not wrong, when he beat Ishihara. So it seems like he's just kind of enjoying life and his family and coaching. I haven't heard anything about him. You?
I have not, but I'm sure, knowing Gray Maynard, he'll probably fight again at some point.
Agreed.
Holly Holm, and let me break in on Holly Holm for a second. I feel like we didn't discuss it because we didn't have the live chat yet, but that Holly Holm Megan Anderson fight, I like the idea of that fight. Made no sense. It just made no sense for the timing of it, where the divisions are. Holly Holm doesn't even want to fight at 145. She wants to go back to 35 and challenge for the title there. That could have been a fight they did this year at some point, Nunes versus Holm. That fight made now Anderson, who was supposed to fight, who could have fought Cyborg. She was the Invicta champion. It would have been an easy sell for her to fight Cyborg at some point this year as the #1 contender, or at least close to it, a legitimate 145er. Now she has a loss, so she's not going to fight Cyborg. That fight made it was an interesting fight. I thought, like, on paper it's a great fight, but as far as the divisions go, made no sense.
You know what? I didn't mind it too much because it seemed like it was pretty obvious what they were doing, right? Like, it was the winner of that's going to ultimately get a Cyborg fight. And I mean, I don't know, man. I'm sick of kind of throwing these women at Cyborg for their UFC debut. Like, that's a whole different, like, carton of eggs that you have to carry at once. Like, dealing with a UFC debut is a lot different than Invicta or whatever else. and then having to fight Cyborg on top of that, like you're just not being set up for any kind of success. So I didn't.
Shaun, you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet, my friend.
Well, Cyborg's breaking plenty of those eggs, man. Like I'm not I'm not jumping in the deep end to fight that. But yeah, I mean, I didn't mind that. But I mean, that was just in June. So Holly's just taking a little bit of a break. Like there's no rush for her really. Like I'm pretty confident she could get either Amanda Nunes or Chris Cyborg next, depending on whenever they fight. But if she wanted to wait, she could get a title shot at either division right now.
I mean, you could make the case that she's the #1 contender in both divisions right now.
Yeah, very much so.
Nick Diaz.
I mean, this is your beat. I mean, he's tied up with his legal issues. Is there any update there?
So the last I've heard about Nick Diaz and his domestic violence case is I believe he has another hearing coming up at the end of August. I want to say August 30th. I'd have to look, but I'm pretty sure it's August 30th in Las Vegas Justice Court. Apparently, according to his statement that his lawyer Ross Goodman sent me a few weeks ago, a grand jury actually chose not to indict Nick Diaz on these charges.
Okay.
So he got through the grand jury. They're not going to indict, but it seems like the DA in Clark County in Nevada is still going to follow through and try to press charges by another means. I guess the grand jury can clear you, but if the DA still decides to press charges, it can still go before a judge, a jury, what have you. I'm not an expert on the legal system in Nevada or anywhere really, but it does seem like
qualified it with Nevada.
It does seem like there was good news for Diaz in this case a few weeks ago, but he's not out of the woods yet. But by any means, he's still facing 3 felony charges, a misdemeanor, all of them domestic violence charges for an incident that happened in May. So it's wait and see to see how it plays out. It's not a great look, not a great situation, but this is what he's going through right now.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine that would get very messy, and that could be very drawn out with how the court system works. So I don't know that we'll get any kind of resolution on that anytime soon, to be honest. So is that it? That's it from Eduardo Bueno?
That is it from Eduardo Bueno.
Thank you so much, Eduardo Bueno, for being such a loyal watcher of the MMA Fighting A-Side podcast. We appreciate it, man. So next up, this is also coming from the MMA Fighting website. This is from M. Rossitron. M. Rossitron. All right. He says, the downturn. Hey, guys, are you feeling the general downturn in MMA interest? 380K is the high water mark for pay-per-view in 2018. It appears there's also a noticeable reduction in demand for MMA outside of a Conor fight. Our metrics on MMA Fighting also reflecting a pullback in demand. And related, is the new era of MMA look like the present? Namely, is the new era of MMA look like the present? Namely, almost weekly events where there are few stacked cards? I don't know that I understand that last part. But yeah, I mean, generally, are you feeling a downturn in MMA interest, Marc?
I mean, I've been feeling a downturn in MMA interest all year, but I feel like in the last few weeks, it's starting to go back up. Maybe that's just anecdotal evidence, but I thought that the UFC 227 pay-per-view numbers they exceeded my expectations. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling newsletter.
Very much so.
And MMAfighting.com, of course, Uncle Meltz reported this week that UFC 227 did around 300,000 pay-per-view buys, which only puts it a little bit fewer than UFC 226, the super fight between Cormier and Stipe Miocic.
That's wild. That's real wild. I'm not gonna lie, I did not expect that.
So to me, that's a good number, and it says to me that Garbrandt and Dillashaw are bigger draws than I think a lot of people thought they were, and maybe even Demetrius Johnson and Cejudo are bigger draws than people thought they were. They sold out the Staples Center. That is not easy to do. It is not easy to do. They had a great gate. So I think that there are some metrics saying that it's on the rise again. I don't know if it's that McGregor rub. I fully expect the McGregor Nurmagomedov fight to do massive numbers at the gate on pay-per-view. UFC 228 will be a big test. I think that I don't know what that will do, But if that's another pay-per-view in the 300,000 range, if it does that well, I think you can safely say that the UFC product is kind of on the rise again. We know that ratings are down, and that's the case everywhere. In all mediums, ratings are down. I mean, people don't watch cable the same way they used to. There are some things that make you say, okay, this is not great for MMA because the ratings are down across the board, and they weren't what they were, and they're not what they were compared to other things like they were before, where they were higher compared to other things. So there are some indications that it is down, which we've spoken about on this show before. But I would like to say that there is a little bit of a silver lining, a little bit of a horizon coming up for that, and we'll see. 228 will be a big one to see where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, I think because we've been guilty of this too, even on this podcast, of sort of bemoaning maybe the downturn in MMA, but then it just pops right back up, man. Like it's hard to forget in the moment, or it's hard to remember in the moment, rather. But this is so cyclical. All of this is so cyclical. It goes down and then it goes up, and then it goes down, and then it goes up. It's just a wave that the sport rides. Right now, I mean, I was blown away, I'm not gonna lie, by that 300,000 mark for UFC 227. I thought that was gonna break the record for lowest pay-per-view buys, and I was pretty stunned, man. I was pretty stunned once Meltzer reported that number, because it didn't feel like there was a lot of interest in that too. And I wonder if, I mean, there are a couple of things, right? Because like Cody and TJ fought on, if I'm not mistaken, on the GSP Bisbing card, right? Yeah, and I mean, that was a huge card. A lot of people saw, and that was a great fight. And generally, their rivalry is probably seen and enjoyed by a lot of people for the lead up to that card. So I'm sure there was some level of carryover that we didn't anticipate for there. And maybe TJ Dillashaw is like actually a draw, like maybe to a certain degree. That would be really a rewarding thing to be true. I would like that to be true, because the way that guy fights is basically like a video game. Like, he is one of the most creative, entertaining, unique fighters that I've ever seen in this sport. So for him, if he actually can sort of sneak up on us and be a draw like this, that would be very cool. Also, though, man, I mean,
and talking about metrics, there were some indications for us on Fight Week that Dillashaw could be a draw there. I mean, there's certainly, put it this way, there's certainly interest in TJ Dillashaw from at least our readers and our viewers.
Yeah, very much so. That's a good point, because we obviously have metrics we can see on the back end of our website and YouTube and whatever. And TJ Dillashaw was pulling like legitimately good numbers all week, especially compared to the other people on that card. It was obvious that people really wanted to hear from and see TJ Dillashaw, which was interesting and surprising to me. Also, though, I mean, I think maybe there's a little bit where they got the Conor rub. I mean, and the Nate Diaz rub. I mean, that was two giant announcements basically the day before or a couple days before that card. That might have helped in some regard, just to even make people aware that there is a card. The type of people that only tune in for a Conor or a Diaz announcement, then all of a sudden discover, oh, hey, there's a couple fights in a few days, and we should maybe order that. But in general, man, I think, I mean, the UFC just made, I think they just, what was the deal? 1.5 billion that they signed with ESPN. Like that's not an indication that the sport's going anytime soon. The ESPN made a giant investment into this sport. And ultimately, I mean, the ratings are what they are, but as this sport moves forward into next year and it sort of moves on streaming platforms exclusively outside of really big events, I don't know that the ratings will matter as much, because you already have that money at that point. The people who like UFC will follow it regardless. And it is just cyclical, man. Like now that we're getting Conor back, we're getting Conor Khabib, Nate Diaz is back. Like, we're going to start seeing a lot of those numbers spike up soon. I think we went through a low point for a little bit now, but I could see us coming out the other side for sure. And I think you're right. UFC 228 is going to be a really indicative benchmark of sort of if this is actually real, if this is a real thing. Because if that fight happens and it's 200,000 or something like that, I think maybe then we'll have to reflect back and attribute a lot of the success of 227 to, again, like a TJ Dillashaw, or maybe getting the Conor rub, that type of thing. But if it's up and it's above 300,000 for a card that maybe not a lot of people are blown away by, I think that's a very good sign.
One last thing, and we'll put this topic to bed. also have to talk about Cody Garbrandt being someone that the UFC had a while ago kind of positioned as a star, and that could also be it as well. I think that he has star potential, and had he won either one of these last two fights, I think they could have perhaps, you know, strapped a rocket to his back and pushed him as one of their premier stars. Of course, that didn't happen, but he's far from done. So I think that Garbrandt is also you have to give him some credit for those numbers as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. So moving on, this next question comes from the MMA Fighting webpage. This is courtesy of Will Flinton, who gets us up with some true or false. I always love these. So I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire true or false, Marks.
Sure.
You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. True or false? The UFC will create a 165-pound weight class within the next 2 years.
Yes. True. They will.
Oh, man, I want to say true. I'm going to say true just to manifest this into reality, because I know Dana White hates it, and I don't understand why Dana White hates it. But, I mean, I'm not rehashing it. I'm not saying anything new. 155 and 170 are most stacked, talent-rich divisions in the entire sport. You could easily split those up into 3, and it would still be just as stacked. It creates more titles. It creates more main event potential fights just with those titles. So I'm gonna say true.
They might as well just do it for the MSG main event. Just have GSP fight for the 165 title.
Who would you throw in there against him at that point?
Kevin Lee.
Ooh, I'll watch that. Would watch. True or false? GSP has more than 2 fights left in his career.
That's a tough one. I would say more than 2.
More than 2. So it's got to be 3 or above.
I would say false. I think that he has 1 or 2. I would say false.
I agree. I think he has 1 and maybe 2, but I think he has 1. True or false? Tough will still be around 3 years from now. What do you think, Mark?
I think that Tough will still be around after the nuclear fallout. Tough is like the MMA reality show version of a cockroach.
I was about to say it's a cockroach.
Yes, it is the MMA version of a cockroach, and no matter what happens, Tough will be around in some format somewhere, possibly on a device or a medium, a service that we don't even know exists, that we don't even know about yet. It doesn't even exist. Tough will be there. It'll be some Google Glass where it's like implanted in your eye and you can watch Tough on demand. I think Tough will last forever. I
really wonder, man, like how much of his and Dana White's insistence to keep Tough is just purely nostalgia, and like how much that show did for the company at a time where it really needed it. Because it's so obvious that they have other better ideas that they can do. Contender Series is 100 times better than Tough for everybody involved, for the fans, for the fighters, for the managers, everybody. There are other things you can do. I do not understand why we are perpetuating this thing that no one watches or cares about. But whatever. Let's move on. You're right. That thing's going to be around after the world ends, and it's still going to be going. So
much so they're building a brand new Tough gym that's going to be for the Contender Series and future seasons of Tough. They're putting it right across the street from the UFC campus.
Oh my God.
Can you guys hear that someone is trying to call me? Can you hear that?
Why is your phone on, Mark? Come on, be professional.
It's on my laptop. So that's my niece. My niece just, I guess she's 4 and she just found out how to use iPads and she knows how to call me. So now she calls me like 10 times a day on FaceTime because she knows how to do it. Like literally 10 times a day. And she's on the East Coast. So she calls me like 6 a.m. Pacific time sometimes. And I'm like half awake. Not even awake. I'm asleep.
Well,
and
you know,
she's
got big news, man. She just ate some delicious applesauce. Like, she's got to tell you about it. Like, what are you going to not need to know about it?
And she just sent me a text because she knows how to do that too, but she can't really write yet. So it's just like it's just gibberish.
I mean, that's adorable.
I don't know if you can see this, but it's literally just like someone pounding on a keyboard. It's a text of just like someone pounding on a keyboard.
Oh man. So true or false?
Meadow, stop calling me. Meadow, please stop FaceTiming me.
True. Mark's niece needs to continue calling her. All right. True or false? Greg Hardy will rank in the top 10 2 years from now. What a depressing question.
Wow. I'm gonna say false. but not because he doesn't have the ability, because I think that in 2 years he may be back in the NFL. I think he may be back in football in 2 years. So I'll say false.
What? What? No, he's never going to be back in football. They're never going to allow him back in football.
Why not?
Dude's been effectively blackballed. Like, no one is signing Greg Hardy.
I don't know, man.
I'm going to say false, but purely only because he's still new to this. And however shallow the heavyweight division is, I think it still takes a little bit longer than that to develop a well-rounded game. Maybe in 3 years, I would say true, but I don't think 2 years. That's 2 years a little too soon.
I think he has a talent. I mean, I think that if he does stick with it and continue training at American Top Team, he can definitely be top 10. I mean, look, that guy can be heavyweight champion. Let's be honest. That guy has all the physical abilities. He has certainly a complicated story and some huge red flags, as we know, with the domestic violence conviction, which was later overturned on appeal. But certainly from a in-cage perspective, he's got an incredible amount of talent.
Yeah, man. I mean, I won't belabor it, but there's a big difference between a world-class NFL caliber athlete and a lot of the athletes that we maybe not now, but we're used to get in this sport. So,
well, the money. I mean, that's really just because of the money. It's just 'cause the money. They can make so much money in the NFL. They're not making that kind of money in the UFC. If the UFC were to have that incentive to draw those gigantic athletes like Greg Hardy, I mean, a gigantic man who has like the agility and speed of like a welterweight, certainly the UFC would get higher caliber fighters, especially in those bigger weight divisions. But if the with the pay scale as it is now, what's the incentive? You're gonna go to the NFL. You're gonna get paid an absurd amount of money to go to the NFL rather than fight in the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, not even football players. In my mind, it's always basketball players that would be like the craziest MMA fighters, because you got guys like 6'8" with insane reaches, and who maybe like 260. Like, you get some of those dudes in there with that athleticism and that coordination, it would be a different story entirely. Maybe one day, man. Maybe one day.
Can you imagine LeBron in the UFC?
I've said this a couple times, but I think if he would have started training wrestling and jiu-jitsu at age 12 or 10 instead of basketball, like, dude would have been the greatest fighter to ever live in anything. Like, it would have just been silly. But whatever. Neither here nor there. Next up, WME, true or false, will no longer be the majority owner of the UFC 5 years from now. That's an interesting one.
True. I'm going to say true.
You think they'll sell?
I think that they'll sell maybe their majority stake. Maybe they'll keep a small percentage, but I think that the way that things go in the business world, there could be reasons to sell and kind of flip it depending on how much they can make for it. I think I will say true on that one. And I mean, in 5 years, the entire landscape of everything of digital media, of television, of cable, of WME, of Endeavor, of the UFC could all be different. So who knows? But I would say true.
Follow-up question: how much of a loss do they sell that at compared to what they bought it at?
It's impossible to say. I don't think right now. Okay, so let's put it this way: if WME, if Endeavor, which they want to be called now, puts the UFC up for sale today, August 15th, 2018, there's no way it gets no one's paying $4 billion for the UFC. Not even today. Close. They're not paying that. I don't know how much it would be. It would still certainly be probably in the billions. No one's paying $4 billion for it today.
Yeah. True or false, Bellator will reach the same caliber level that Strikeforce was about 5 years from now. And he says, keep in mind how many great cards and fighters that came out of Strikeforce.
That's a good one. I think I would say true. And you can make the argument that Bellator is not far off that Strikeforce level now. I think it's a matter of...
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, what are we looking at? Are we talking about ratings? Because I mean, yeah, they were able to get on regular television and draw some decent ratings with Strikeforce. I mean, I think in terms of like a roster of talent, they have some solid names. I think that the key is really just the prospects, right? The key is how these kids grow up. The Aaron Picos, the AJ McKees, the Ed Ruths, the James Gallaghers. I mean, those guys could all be stars. Those guys could all be top 10, top 5 in their divisions in the world, not Bellator, in the world. And if they all, or even 2 or 3 of them, get to that level and reach stardom and become legitimate draws on television or DAZN or wherever Bellator is, it could be a big deal, and it's possible. I mean, Aaron Pico, I think you're laughing because of DAZN probably.
Yeah.
But,
Dude, I like that you spotted. I couldn't help but not crack up whenever that is said.
Yeah, but I mean, especially Aaron Pico. I mean, I think that kid is just a freaking superstar in waiting.
Yeah.
If they manage it right, and look, there is history to say that Scott Coker and Rich Chow can manage these prospects correctly. They've done it before. I think they could do a good job. The question is, will Viacom be patient and wait for all those prospects to get to that level and give Bellator, continue giving them the resources they need? Will they be patient? That is the question to me.
I mean, I don't know that it's even a Viacom thing at this point, right? Because the Viacom's not involved with DAZN. Like,
Bellator, but Viacom still owns Bellator, is what I'm saying. Will Viacom be patient with Bellator?
Absolutely, but I mean, they got crazy money from DAZN for that, so they're going to have some cash to work with. I think I say true as well. Though I will. I mean, you said they're kind of close right now. I would remind you, basically every Strikeforce, like 2 years after Strikeforce, like every champion in the UFC was a Strikeforce fighter. Like their talent level was so ridiculous, and maybe we didn't fully appreciate it and understand it, but even at the time, it was pretty apparent that like a lot of these dudes are really, or dudes and women, a lot of these fighters are really, really serious world-class fighters. Bellator's well on their way, man. Like they have had a tremendous year. They're doing, maybe not in terms of ratings for shows, but just in terms of moves and acquisitions and deals they've made. They have had a tremendous year, and they have their best coming up with this welterweight tournament and all these different things that they're doing. And like you said, I think the big thing, you made a really great point, is these young prospects, man. Like they're just snatching up all these young wrestlers, these young, decorated, exciting, athletic wrestlers. Ed Ruths, Aaron Picos, Logan Storleys, those type of guys. They're snatching them up and like properly grooming them. Like that is one thing Scott Coker and Rich Chow know how to do, which is properly groom a prospect, not throw somebody too deep into the deep end of the pool too early. Like they give these guys 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 8 fights on like prelims, Bellator dark prelims, where they can just, there's no pressure on them. They're getting sort of handpicked opponents, things that they can, again, opponents where the opposition, where they can get carefully groomed and develop into a legitimate force. And I think that is going to play a big key in this. Like you said, 5 years from now, where are those guys? Where are the Ed Ruths, the Aaron Picos, the Logan Storleys? I could see them definitely approaching that Strikeforce level. Last two from Will Flinton. He says, pay-per-view model is dead 5 years from now. True or false?
True. I think 5 years from now, it's a whole, everything is different 5 years from now. Who the hell knows what's going to be, 5 years from now in every medium, in every walk of life. I mean, technology changes so rapidly now. Who knows? Yeah,
I mean, think about where we were in 2013, right? Like, it's a completely different world. Streaming services weren't even really a thing. I do think pay-per-view will survive on one level, though, which would be like the Conor fights or the Mayweather fights, like those type of things, like the huge world type events where everyone's going to pay for it. I feel like pay-per-view will survive at least on some level with that. And then last one, true or false, Michael Chandler signs with the UFC. We already kind of addressed this, but what do you think?
I would say false. I don't think he will. I don't know. I don't have any kind of insider knowledge. Maybe I'll try to track down Mr. Chandler in Nashville this weekend while I'm there, since he lives there now. He has a gym there. But I don't think he will. I think he is loyal to Bellator. I think that they will give him, hopefully, what he deserves as far as the contract goes. And there's unfinished business for him there in Bellator with Brent Primus, and there's still a lot of good fights for him down there. And yeah, I mean, I think he stays ultimately. Would I be surprised and shocked if he left to go to the UFC? No, I wouldn't be shocked. I think it comes down to what the contract situation is.
I say true that I think what was the question? That he will stay or won't stay? That he signs with the UFC. So I say false. I think he will stay with Bellator. I agree with you. Though I think if he's ever going to sign with the UFC, I feel like this is going to be the one, man. Because again, he is 32. He has the best years of his career ahead of him. And then at that point, he's probably on the downslide. I think he's going to his expressing that he's willing to look at his opportunities this time. I think that part of that's a power play just to like get some leverage, but also part of it could be very real, man. Like I can imagine a competitive guy like that when he's 40, maybe regretting not ever exploring that option, always wondering how he would have actually done against, you know, the Tony Fergusons and the Khabibs and the Conors of the world. Because it's very clear that Michael Chandler is a world-class lightweight. So I could see there being some impetus for him to move to the UFC, but I agree with you. I think ultimately he's a super, super loyal guy. Bellator's always stood by him. He's always stood by Bellator. I think he's going to end up there. What's next?
I think we're going to move over to the Twitter machine.
Ooh, all right.
To, the chat rappers hashtag, and we'll start with Amir Betis, longtime watcher of our only 6th episode of the ASI live chat. This is a good question. A case like Rafael Assunção being 11-1, not in title contention. What's causing the gridlock in divisions? Should rankings be redone and given weight? And with gridlock, is it possible UFC increased signing of younger fighters is detrimental to new careers?
Okay, so this question went a little different direction than I expected it to. So the gridlock in divisions, I don't know that that's really a new phenomenon. That's sort of always existed in some capacity in various divisions especially where divisions where you have long stretches without a title being defended, like we saw with Bantamweight. That being said, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's anything to UFC signing younger fighters detrimental to the new careers. But I'm going to try to kind of change this question a little bit. I talked to Rafael Assunção last week about sort of his situation and what he wants to do and what he wants out of his next fight. I mean, he's 11-1 in the bantamweight division. He has beaten TJ Dillashaw once. It was a very close fight. He has lost to TJ Dillashaw once. If this is any other person in any other division, and they're 11-1 with a 1-1 record with the champion, and on a winning streak of any kind, don't you feel like that person probably gets a title shot? Like, what is it that's stopping Rafael Assunção from getting that title shot, in your opinion? Because even when I'll add, even when I wrote this article and released it, I got a lot of feedback from people saying they're not interested in seeing that.
So here's a weird thing about MMA fans, right? A lot of fans want the rankings to be the end-all be-all if they're good rankings and have the people who quote-unquote deserve to get the title shot to get that title shot. But a lot of other fans are like, well, we don't care enough about this person, even if they are 11-1 or have a great record. We don't want to see that. We don't have any interest in this person to see that title shot. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the business of the UFC is to and when we talk about money fights and all that other BS or what have you, super fights.
I'm let you finish, but I just want to add, money fights is such an overused term at this point, man. There are like 4 fights in the sport that are money fights, and it's basically a Conor fight or like a Nate Diaz fight or like a GSP fight and a John Jones. Nothing else, and Brock Lesnar too. I'll add that. Nothing else in the sport is a money fight. There may be a fight that's a little more popular, maybe a fight that maybe draws 100,000 more, but nothing's a money fight other than those 5. That's it. I'm sick of that term. I'm just sick of it.
Agreed. It is an overused term, but what I'm trying to say is basically it's the UFC's job and it's their business to put together the fights, title fight or non-title fight, that fans want to see. And if a fighter has an amazing sterling record, not Aljamain Sterling, an amazing, fantastic record, undefeated, 11-1, whatever, what have you, that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, it is a business, and the UFC is only going to put those people into title spots, which are going to be main events, which are going to be co-main events, which are going to be big spots on big shows, pay-per-views, if fans want to see it. That's kind of just the bottom line. And that's kind of, I guess, what's going on with the Assunção, where, look, if you talk about earned and deserving and rankings, yeah, I mean, that's the guy, right? That's the guy that has paid his dues, and he's had an amazing career, and he can't get that big shot because there doesn't seem to be an interest in him fighting for whatever reason, because it's not a sport in that way. This is not a sport, except for the PFL maybe, where there's playoffs and the 2 best teams or the 2 best sides face each other in the end. It's not that way. It is about, we have a pay-per-view coming up. We have a main event on our pay-per-view. We need to sell pay-per-views. Who are we going to put in the main event? We're not going to put someone in there if fans don't want to see them, even if they have the best record in the world. It just doesn't work that way. So in some cases, I wish it was. I wish it was strictly merit, and it was just by record and by ranking. But even that has its flaws, because as we know, the rankings are a complete disaster. The rankings are terrible. So even that has its flaws, and the merit-based argument is also subjective. Well, who deserves it over another? So end of the day, the UFC is going to try to put the fighter that is going to make them the most money, maybe not a money fight, but whoever's going to make the most money on pay-per-view is probably going to get that spot, whether it's the co-main event or the main event. And that's just how it goes, and there's no way around it as it is currently constituted. As long as there's ratings and pay-per-view buys, that's how it's going to be. That
being said, man, I do feel bad for a guy like Rafael Assunção, man, because like you, even in his last fight, I think it was at UFC 226 where we were both there. He wins the fight, and then afterwards he says that he's never talked to Joe Rogan in a post-fight interview, which is fucking stunning to me, man. Like, this dude is 11-1 at bantamweight, and he's never gotten a post-fight interview with Joe Rogan. Like, what does that say? And speaking with him, he's basically at the point where he's just like, I don't know what else to do. The UFC isn't giving him the top contenders in the division to be able to stake his claim. They're basically at this point making him a gatekeeper, fighting the Rob Fonts of the world, where he's not getting this chance to really like beat these top level guys and cement his claim. And it's I feel bad for that type of situation, man, because at that point, like, he's not a shit talker, and he doesn't want to be, but he almost feels compelled to be, and that's a weird spot to be, because it's easy to see through that if that's not natural for you. That being said, and we've gone a little long with this question, but I just want to get your answer on this. How would you book bantamweight, just really quickly?
Well, that's a good question. I don't want to see. I know that Dillashaw wants to fight Cejudo. Cejudo wants to fight Dillashaw at either weight class. I would like to see Dillashaw fight either Marlon Moraes or Dominic Cruz. I think that. So you
are not even putting Assunção in the discussion. You're putting a guy he beat like a year ago ahead of him.
Yes, that is correct. But again, it goes back to what I just said. That it's not a sport in that way. It's an entertainment product that is based on pay-per-view buys and ratings. And if that's the case, what if I mean, every poll, right? How many media members did polls after Dillashaw won and beat Garbrandt? Who do you want to see Dillashaw fight next? Every single poll was Dominic Cruz. He's the bigger name. It's the more interesting fight on some levels. And Cruz has beaten Dillashaw. He's beaten Dillashaw. So if they did that, you wouldn't hear any complaints from me. I do feel bad for Assunção, because it's not the sport that he probably thought it was, right? A lot of these fighters think that they're getting into, they're professional athletes. They're the toughest athletes and best athletes on the planet, but they are in a sports entertainment property, not a full sport. It's just not. It doesn't go the way that other sports go, where the best face the best. It's whoever's going to make the most money. And again, and like I said, as long as there are ratings on the line and pay-per-view buys and revenue to be made, that's the decision that those are the decisions that the UFC are going to make. They're going to go with the more popular fighter as a popularity contest.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, we spent a little too long on this one. Moving on. Next question coming from Twitter, from loyal listener Christopher Kitt. Thank you so much for the question. He hashtag the A side. Choosing from a pool of fighters never to have competed in the UFC, who is in the conversation as the greatest of all time? And I'll answer this real quick, because to me this is an easy one. It's the guy that's the only guy who's ever thrown into that GOAT debate conversation without the UFC pedigree, and that's Fedor. I feel like that's the answer. What do you think?
Cole Conrad.
Oh,
don't at me.
Greatest fighter never fight in the UFC is Cole Conrad.
I don't know. I would probably say Fedor. I would say Fedor, because I mean, when you think about the greatest of all time discussions, what's the list? John Jones, Demetrius Johnson, George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, Daniel Cormier, and usually Fedor Emelianenko. Yeah. What is the one thing that those guys have in common that Fedor does not? He never fought in the UFC. All of them were UFC champions. So it is Fedor. That is the answer. But you can make cases for others. But in that GOAT conversation, Fedor is always kind of in there, kind of on that short list. And he's never fought in the UFC, and all those other guys have.
Yeah. So hey, next one, and I'm gonna set you up for this because I know you've been wanting to talk about this, and I can't wait to watch the live viewership just plummet It's gonna go as I ask this question. But Marc Raimondi, my friend, last night trolling fans with a poll about
trolling fans. I'm just trying to be scientific about this to see if there's some interest.
When I think scientists, I think Marc Raimondi. So this question comes from Ian McInerney. I really hope I'm saying that right.
McInerney.
I hope it's something like that because he's been asking questions and I love him. We were talking back and forth on Twitter. And he says, after your poll about pro wrestling, what exactly is it that grabs you about it, Marc? Not meant to be rhetorical. I genuinely don't understand its popularity and never have, even as a kid in the 90s. Is it nostalgia, spectacle? What is it? So I'm gonna put you on a timer, Marc. You have 3 minutes. Tell me what it is about pro wrestling and why people should care about it.
That's a hard one because why does anyone like anything, right? I mean, why do people like The Walking Dead? Why do people like Game of Thrones? It's an entertainment. It's an entertainment property. The reason why, and I encourage people to kind of tune in and lose that stigma of pro wrestling a little bit. And I don't necessarily mean WWE, which is not for everyone, and pro wrestling is not for everyone the same way that MMA is not for everyone. But I think that there is a stigma that people have with WWE, and it's that it's for kids and it's so fake and there are these ridiculous storylines and it's silly and it's whatever. And in some cases that is not wrong, in some cases that is correct. But the other night was the New Japan Pro Wrestling. The finale of their big summer tournament every year, the G1 Climax. It was the 28th year of this. And we watched it over Esther and Casey's place, of course, as we do. And Anthony Walker from Sherdog, good friend of ours and a guy who is a good writer of MMA. And he trains in MMA. And he had that stigma. He was over. He didn't really know what he was getting into. But all he remembers is the ridiculous WWE of his childhood that he has no interest in watching again. We showed Anthony one match. It was Kenny Omega versus Kota Ibushi on day 18 of the G1 from Friday night into Saturday morning. We showed him that match on Saturday night. And immediately Anthony was sold on what this is and what this could be because it's a different product. The Japanese product is based on athleticism and it's very hard hitting. And yeah, it's choreographed. Obviously, it's not real fighting. But the blows and the damage that these wrestlers are taking is very real. And it is a dynamic product to watch. And that's what I enjoy about wrestling. I don't enjoy all of the pomp and circumstance and the storylines and that kind of stuff. I enjoy it's almost like watching like the best possible action scene in a movie, if that makes sense. Only it's being done live in front of a crowd of 15,000 people. That's how I would kind of compare it. It's like, people like action movies and some of these amazing choreographed fight scenes. It's like watching a fight scene live in front of a bunch of people, and the margin for error is so small. And I want to turn this on back to you, Shaun, for a second, because I'm sure my time is probably running out.
Oh yeah,
you were not a pro wrestling fan up until like a few months ago, but you have since turned the corner, and now you're into, especially the Jap. I don't think you're a WWE fan, but you like to watch the Japanese product, some of the indie stuff. I mean, it's dangerous. It's high flying. It's super athletic. What changed your mind about pro wrestling as a kind of a new fan?
Okay, so I'm gonna be super brief as people just continue to tune out on this. But I will say, I was vehemently on the Luke Thomas side of fuck pro wrestling for my entire life. Basically, I have never cared about pro wrestling at all. New Japan Pro Wrestling, and especially now a lot of the indies, PWG, which is a big promotion over near you in LA. It's pretty violent, man. It is pretty violent. It is a crazy spectacle to watch in person. I went to one event and I was completely sold. I was we often joke in our group that it's life changing to go to one of these PWG events or New Japan events, and it's kind of true, man. Like it's a little bizarre, and now I'm fully on the bandwagon. But to each his own. I can understand why people wouldn't want to watch it, especially because WWE really sucks. I don't actually watch WWE, but it seems like it's just trash. It seems like it's just a bunch of promos and talking and BS, and not actually cool fighting, which is basically what New Japan is. It's basically just a scripted fight with legitimate crazy injuries and all sorts of crazy stunts. And that's actually a good way to think of it. It's just a bunch of stunts over and over again at like this world-class, high-class level. But that's it. I'm not going to torture people anymore with that. Give New Japan a chance if y'all want to, or don't. It doesn't matter to me. Whatever.
I would encourage any MMA fan to give the Japanese product or maybe the indie product a chance in pro wrestling, because especially a lot of the Japanese wrestlers have MMA credentials, have legitimate combat sports credentials. I mean, Minoru Suzuki is still in New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's 50 years old. He's the co-founder of Pancrase.
He's fucking terrifying. He's
a terrifying man. He's beaten Matt Hume and Ken Shamrock in fights. I mean, he has a legitimate background. A lot of fighters, Kenny Omega has a legitimate MMA background too. So I would encourage anyone who maybe there's a stigma against WWE to check out the Japanese product.
All right. Well, so we're winding down. We have time for probably one more question, maybe two. So let's jump right back into the deep end of MMA. This one's coming from Eric Chibuchi on Twitter, who asks, why wouldn't Conor McGregor grab Ben Askren to help him train for Khabib Nurmagomedov with his credentials and his wrestling IQ? That's an interesting one. What do you think, Marc?
I just feel like that's not McGregor's style. His style. He's very loyal to his team and who's on his team already. In rare cases, like when he went to boxing and he brought over like a Paulie Malignaggi and Deshaun Johnson to do sparring, that was different because it was a whole different sport. But I think he's very loyal to his team. He's kind of stuck in a good way. He's kind of stuck with them, and they've worked so well together in the past over the years. Obviously, he's had great success, and he has a wrestling coach, and I don't think he ever sees the need to kind of bring in someone different, especially like someone like Ben Askren. We saw what happened with Paulie Malignaggi. We saw someone go into that camp, and it was a disaster right away. It was a disaster right away, and I don't think that's a good environment for someone to go into. They're a very close-knit camp, and I think that they are best when they're kind of together, as SBG. And when outsiders come in, it doesn't seem to go all that great.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's just not their style. It would be damn interesting though, man. Like Khabib and Ben Askren have very different wrestling styles, games to them, but they're similar in a way, man. Like they're both super sticky, lots of wrist control, lots of double wrist rides. Like they are suffocating in their own ways. It would certainly prepare Conor in some element of drowning, whatever that feeling is. But you're right. I don't think that's any kind of likely. I feel like they're so loyal. He's going to do it in-house and maybe bring in one or two people, but not somebody at that level. Let's see. We have a few minutes left, so let's do one more question. This one's coming. You got one?
From Felice, from the A side hashtag on Twitter. With the recent announcement of Golden Boy Promotions, do you see the world of MMA and boxing merging in the next 5 years and mixed cards becoming the norm? So, of course, I just wanted to jump in before you answer, Shaun, that yesterday, Oscar De La Hoya told Fight Hub that Golden Boy is targeting the Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz 3-fight MMA fight to be on Thanksgiving weekend. And I reported yesterday that Golden Boy has actually already applied for that date at the Forum in Inglewood, California, in the LA area for that fight on November 24th. So it seems like, although the fight itself, I don't believe is fully done, from what I'm told, it's not officially signed by both parties. That is the date they are targeting. So that is a bit of news. We're probably going to get Chuck versus Tito 3 on November 24th later this year in a trilogy fight of two UFC Hall of Famers. So with that being said, Shaun, what are your thoughts on Golden Boy kind of crossing over into MMA?
I think it's going to be a one-off. I feel like they just Oscar sees an opportunity here to make some money. I mean, we were in UFC 226 fight week when we were literally right there when Tito and Chuck faced off, and that was one of the most viral things from that week. So like people can bitch and complain and moan about it, but y'all gonna watch. Maybe not all of you, but enough of you are that like it's going to be worth it for Golden Boy to have done this. I don't even know that it's an experiment. It's just it is what it is. But I don't see it becoming the norm at all, though. I mean, we even saw with Zuffa Boxing and Dana White trying to enter into the boxing world, and then now starting to say
Zuffa Boxing.
Yeah, how Jesus, Mark.
What is Risen and Zuffa? What is going on?
I'm sorry that I don't pronounce two words similar to you.
Similar to me, I'm talking about the correct way to pronounce these words. Zuffa.
All right, Mr. Grammar. All right, Mr. Grammar. Back to what I'm actually saying. Damn it, I lost my point at this point. Oh, Dana's already coming back and saying, Zuffa.
There you
boxing.
go.
There you go. Zuffa Boxing, it was a little more challenging than he expected, and he met some sort of barriers trying to enter into the boxing world. I don't think I think this question's more or less relating to Golden Boy doing this, but also like a McGregor, Mayweather, or Gervonta Davis, TJ Dillashaw type of thing. I just don't see that ever really becoming a thing that we see consistently in the sport. Maybe for occasional one-offs like this Chuck fight or the Mayweather fight, but it'll be nothing else other than that.
Over under on pay-per-view buys for Chuck versus Tito 3. What do you think?
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't know, because there's a lot of questions we don't really have answers yet for with how they're going to promote this, just how everything's going to work in general. Does Oscar De La Hoya know how to promote MMA? Like if they're doing the boxing press conferences where this crap that we saw during the Maymac tour, where it's just like dudes get up and give long speeches and then sit down, like that's trash, and that's not going to work for MMA fans. That was super obvious as the Maymac tour went on, where like day 2 it kind of peaked in Toronto, where that was really cool because Conor was able to adapt and it was a really great presser. But after that, man, it devolved into utter trash real quick, and MMA fans are not going to be into hearing from Oscar De La Hoya stand up there and talk for 20 minutes about some crap they don't care about. So if that's the way they promote it, I don't think it's going to do well. But if they promote it in a correct way, in an MMA-centric way, in a way that adapts to MMA fans, I could see it actually doing maybe like 200, 300,000 buys, which would be a huge, huge win for them.
I agree. I thought they missed an opportunity during UFC 227 week when all the media was in town in LA for UFC 227. You have Chuck, who doesn't live far away. You have Tito, who doesn't live far away. How do you not do something that week with those two guys? Something. I mean, Chuck was at the fights. I think Tito might have been there too. They were there. How does Golden Boy not do something there that week when all the media is already in town, when the fans are kind of engaged? That was an opportunity there that they could have taken some attention away from UFC 227. They didn't do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Real quick, want to fit one more question, and this comes from Twitter, from John Drury, and this is something we addressed earlier, but I just want to reiterate it. He asks, will this ever make it to Apple Podcasts? And like we said at the top, we're going to be on SoundCloud now. We're going to be uploaded hopefully soon after this records to the MMA Fighting SoundCloud, which used to be the MMA Beat SoundCloud. But as for iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, all those type of things, we have been promised that those are all next, and those will be taken care of soon. So I don't have an exact timeline for you, but it will be sometime, hopefully, very soon. And this is just as frustrating for us as it is for you guys. So I appreciate you guys sticking with us.
So I think now we're going to move into our final segment of the show.
Yes, sir.
Called the promo, where we each kind of give a little bit of a rant on what's on our minds in the MMA world. You wanna kick us off with your promo, Shaun?
Sure. I am very excited about this, Marc. This is a long time coming, so let's launch right into it. So, I mean, any longtime fans of MMA fighting know that I am a giant, self-professed Tony Ferguson Marc. This is no news here. I'm not breaking anything new. The dude is weird. Dude's unique. He's out here capitalizing every word, making weird-ass hashtags. His fighting style is fascinating. He's basically dancing out there. I love it. I love everything about it. I've long maintained that I think he's the best lightweight in the world. I hope he gets a chance to prove that at some point ever. But anyway, on Saturday, Mr. El Cucuy announces to the world some news we've all kind of been waiting for, that he is cleared for combat. Yes, this is great news for the lightweight division. We're back in business. Conor is back. Khabib and Conor is like 7 weeks away at this point, which is crazy. Nate Diaz is back. Diaz Poirier is a banger. And now Tony's back. So we're back in business. So what happens on Monday when I wake up on Monday? What do I see? I'm scrolling through the Twitters. What do I see? 2 days, literally 2 days after announcing himself cleared for combat, Tony Ferguson is out here doing some insane bizarre, ridiculous, dangerous workout where he's like balancing on one arm, like on two plyometric boxes that are like stacked on top of each other upside down. Like, dude's just a madman, like working like a madman. Then he starts standing on top of said boxes that are, again, upside down, doing some sort of karate kata, Daniel LaRusso style. All is missing is some sunglasses, and this would have been the most Tony Ferguson thing I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, it was just amazing. So, Tony Ferguson, man, this one's for you, you crazy, crazy, magnificent bastard. Welcome back. Please, please, please never change. But please, 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 please be careful. We need you out here. You son of a bitch. Do not get hurt. Thank you.
That's going to be a hard one to top. That was good. That was good stuff. And I completely co-sign your Tony Ferguson fanboyism. We never changes, ever. So let me bust out my promo. The MMA media, not real journalists, gossip mongers, peddle clickbait. These are all criticisms of the MMA media. This is what we see on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook on a regular basis, that we're not real journalists, that we're just peddling crap, essentially. Some of these same fans think that the MMA media should cover a dispute between an MMA manager and a New Jersey restaurant owner. The same fans who think that we are clickbait mongers and that we are peddling gossip think that we should be writing and covering and talking about a personal dispute between an MMA manager and a New Jersey restaurant owner about a cardboard cutout of a UFC fighter. Does that sound ridiculous to you, Shaun? It sounds ridiculous to me. I'm not sure why that is newsworthy or why people find it newsworthy. I know that there are people that have issues with said MMA manager. Of course, I'm talking about Ali Abdelaziz. And some of those videos from the Rivoli's owner in New Jersey are pretty entertaining. I'm not going to lie. I kind of had a chuckle when I saw some of those videos, some promos of his own on Twitter and on Instagram. That's all well and good, but I don't see how that is a story for the MMA media to cover. I just don't. And I think that it's a bit hypocritical for fans to say that we are not covering that. Fans who say that we are clickbait mongers and that we're constantly looking for clickbait, and then we don't cover that story. I don't see how those two things go together. Because to me, that would be clickbait. To me, that would be gossip. That's just a personal dispute. I mean, there was some crass language. Okay, if there's any kind of legal thing, let me know. If there's a lawsuit filed, let me know. If there's an arrest, let me know. But until then, I don't see how that is news for the MMA media.
All right. Well done. Fired up Marc Raimondi is always the best Marc Raimondi. Well, I think that wraps it up today, man. This has been fun as always. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for your wonderful questions. We will be back again next Wednesday, same time, same place, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on MMA Fighting. In the meantime, hit us with those hashtags, hashtag chat rappers, hashtag the A side. We will have this podcast up on SoundCloud. I promise you it will be up, and we will tweet that out when it's ready. Again, thank you so much for joining us. This has been the A Side Live Chat podcast. Have a good week.
Peace.